When we talk to our kids, we often use words that represent whole concepts at a time. We do it so spontaneously that it's difficult to communicate without using these little important words. When our kids don't have a good repertoire of concept-type words, it makes it difficult for them to do as told, or to express themselves, or to deliver a message accurately. Today, we will discuss what concept words are, why they are important, and what you can do to increase your child's understanding of them at home. And this is the fun part, because you don't need flashcards, you don't need apps. You already have everything you need to teach these words, just by playing, talking, and living life with your child. And I'm going to call attention to what you already have and what you already know, so that you can be intentional when you are teaching your kiddo. Does your child have a speech-language delay and you really want them to talk? Do difficult behaviors derail home life and you know the frustration is a communication struggle? Does your child see a speech therapist and you wonder, what do they do and how can I help? If these or similar questions are in your mind, this podcast is for you. Hello, my name is Dina Lynn Rosenbush. I am a speech-language pathologist that has worked with children from birth to 21 for 3 decades. And in my classrooms, I see you wanting to connect with the heart of your child, but their speech and language skills create a barrier. So if you have a kiddo that has difficult behaviors, needs to expand their language or learn to say speech sounds, and maybe even receives speech therapy, stay tuned, because in this podcast, you will learn how to use your daily life as a tool to communication practice and how to do that practice. You will become confident knowing you are making the difference you want to make. And you will hear success stories of parents who have navigated these struggles already. We'll do this all while focusing on building deep, meaningful connection and confidence in your kiddo. So grab a cup of coffee along with a notebook and pen. It's time to speak in the way your child's brain understands. And that is the language of play. Welcome back, listeners. The webinar Beyond Obedience, Unveiling the Power of Listening in Kids is back, and it happens in just a few days, which is this Tuesday. I hope you can join us. Have you ever considered the art of listening? It's more than just hearing words. It's about truly connecting, understanding, and responding. And for our children, mastering these skills is vital for their growth and development. So join us in this free, in-demand webinar, and we'll uncover the profound impact that listening skills have on developing communication. Because if they do not listen well, it's time to be considering what the cause might be of that and address it. Obedience is not always the issue. We will discuss how speech delays impact listening and vice versa. Your perspective is sure to change, and you will change your parenting accordingly. Check the show notes for the registration link, and I look forward to seeing you there. And by the way, it is scheduled twice, 8 hours apart, to accommodate your varying time zones. And be sure to share it with others who live and work with children. Next, I want to thank my sponsor, the Center for Play and Exploration. Getting stuck, fighting burnout, and recovering delight is possible even when you have little ones. The Center for Play and Exploration is an organization that supports adults in restoring some of the childlike wonder you had as a kid. As parents, we get so busy that we get lost in our to-do list and other tasks of life while we try to keep up. We can lose our spontaneity and joy. But what if you could feel different just by changing how you think? This is one way you will benefit from contacting the Center for Play and Exploration. Use the link in the show notes and mention the language of play for a 20% discount. In addition, Dave, the founder of the Center of Play and Exploration, is an engaging speaker. So if you are looking to book a speaker for one of your events, look no further. And finally, before we begin, I want to take a moment to thank you, the listeners of Finland, Sri Lanka, and Hong Kong. It is so fun to see that the Language of Play was a top 10 podcast in your countries recently. All right, now let's get into the meat of this episode. When I work in preschool programs as a speech therapist, or in some countries, the speech pathologist, or some places we call it speech clinician. In the United States, it is all the same, but in some countries, it's differentiated. Anyway, when I work in preschool programs as a speech path, all the kids worked on concept words. That is, all of them, whether they were on an IEP or not, whether they had special needs or not, whether they had speech delays or not. And this is because concept words is a huge focus at this age. And the preschool teachers are so good to know that we have to embed lots and lots of exposure to all of the different concept type words. An example of a child that is not particularly getting it would be something you probably see at home. Little Julie is told, put your book in your backpack and hang your bag on the hook. And she smiles, she agrees, and she goes to play. But the backpack was not put up on the hook, and the book was not put in the bag. And it seems that Julie understood. She acted like she understood, but her behavior shows us that she didn't actually understand. She was compliant, so it seemed, in her attitude, but she didn't actually do the do. So was that disobedience? No, not in this case. In this case, you learn, and I learned, exactly what our students don't know. So when I go into a classroom and I tell a child, dry your hands after you wash them. And I know they've done it many, many times, but this time they don't. But I hand them a paper towel and say, dry your hands, and they do. Then the issue is not in obedience whatsoever. It is in the comprehension of some portion of what I said. And very often it's these words of after, in, before, beside. And before we dig into the concept words, I want to call attention to something that kids naturally do, and that is they naturally agree. And they will agree and not comply. And this does not show disobedience. This shows you that there's something that they're missing in their comprehension. Now, I'm not saying kids don't naturally disagree. Of course, that happens too. But when kids don't quite understand, that's when they just nod their head and smile and say yes. And if we ask them, do you understand? They nod, they smile, and they say yes. This is a normal response, even when a child does not know that they do not know. And off they hop to play because life is good. Now let's discuss what concept words are and why they're important and how we help our kids to capture the meanings. Concept words can be categorized in several types. One type would be spatial relationships, or we call them prepositions. And these words are what we're going to talk about today. But there are also other types of concept words that would be quantitative. So words that relate to quantity and number, including a few, many, some, equal, part, whole, tall, short. They are quantitative. They tell us something about how much. There are also words that relate to time or temporal concepts. And that would be words like tomorrow, yesterday, early, late. It also includes months of the year or days of the week. Another group of concepts would be emotional states, words that describe the feeling and emotions such as happy, sad, angry, scared, disappointed, and so many more. I know we have episodes that talk about the importance of teaching emotional language to our kiddos. One other way to express emotional language is to state emotional words as a concept. Another example of a concept word category would be descriptive, and that would be your adjectives. That would be what describes characteristics or qualities, color, shape, size, texture, smell, hardness, softness, new, old, clean, dirty, words like this. Now, there are more ways that we group words, but this is enough for now, I think, to jog your memory, because you may not have been thinking about these things since you were in high school doing English class. And today, we're going to focus specifically on prepositions. And bear in mind that what you learn today about prepositions and teaching them, you do the same thing for any concept word. But in order to teach it, I want to take one category and explain in a little bit more detail, and then I think you will see how to apply it to other categories of concept words. Concept words are forming the building blocks of language. You might remember back to your schooling, and we called prepositions parts of speech. And today, you will understand what was so complicated in high school, but I guarantee it will be much easier. All right, what is the use of these words? They help our kids to be able to describe things, follow directions, compare objects, and explain where things are. And these are your prepositions, words and short phrases that tell us a location. Think of phrases like on the chair, under the table, between the shoes, next to the dog. When our kids do not do as told, we must consider if this is an area where they need to grow. How sad it is when we believe our children intentionally disobey, but in actuality, they weren't fully understanding. And this happens so much with our kids under 7. What they learn in one context, in the kitchen, they might not necessarily apply to what they're told when they're in the living room or outside or at someone else's house. We will unpack this and other related ideas in the webinar on Tuesday. So again, find the webinar in the show notes and come join us. When your kids understand and use prepositions, they can follow your instructions more easily. And here's another one. They play more cooperatively with their friends. They're able to describe what they see, and when they tell you stories, those stories actually make sense. How many of us just really, really wish that we understood the stories that our kids are trying to tell us? Either it's difficult to understand because they don't have sounds correct, or it's just difficult to understand because what they're saying doesn't roll. It doesn't make sense cohesively in a sentence. Prepositions show up everywhere in school and life. So let's think about school for a moment. The teacher says, write your name on the top of the page. Stand in line behind me. This second one has 2 phrases in the same sentence. In line and behind me. Conceptually, the child needs to understand both concepts and relate them together. And if your child doesn't yet understand these words or phrases, those directions can be really confusing. So they look around and they copy what they see. We might mistakenly think that they're not listening or that they do understand, when in reality, they might not know what next to means, and they respond according to what's right in their mind. In addition, for kids, next, or right next to, or next to might be totally different meanings, or for your child, it might mean all the same thing. By watching their behavior, we can sleuth out what they are not understanding so we can help them learn. The next thing people wonder is, well, what age does this actually happen? And I will say that 18 to 24 months, you will start to hear these words come into play pretty often. And usually it's words like in and on. Between 2.5 to 3.5 or so, they use words regularly like under, behind, in front of, and so much more. And depending on their exposure, Even when they're younger, they might have certain other words, because if you always say a particular phrase, a particular concept word, they will pick up on it. Regular, repeated exposure in context is what teaches. Now, by age 4, kids are typically using many, many location words in their speech. But let's keep in mind 2 things. 1, children usually understand these words before they say them, so your toddler can put things in the box before they're able to say it. And 2, many of our common words have multiple meanings. So even if your child does know the meaning in one sentence, they might not know the meaning in another. Now let's start in with the fun part, and this is that you don't need the flashcards or apps because you've got everything already at home. Let's have a few ideas, and always it's play-based learning that really makes a difference. And these are your typical games that you are so familiar with. Hide and seek with toys. So you hide your stuffed animal under the blanket and say, "Where's the bear?" "Oh, he's under the blanket." Another idea is to make an obstacle course. Crawl through the tunnel, jump over the pillow, sit on the couch. And when you hear me represent that one particular word that represents the concept, that's how you say it to your kids too. Maybe you're going to use blocks, cars, or dolls, whatever your child loves. Describe what's happening. The car went under the bridge. As you play, you narrate what is going on. And remember, when we narrate, we speak what they are paying attention to. In your everyday routines, you have lots and lots of chances to use more prepositions. Put your spoon next to your plate. Let's put your shirt on and your shoes under the bench. Your book is in your backpack. And then you notice that your child doesn't follow, so you say, "Your book is in your backpack." Just talk as you go and represent the words for your children so that they start to pick up on them more and more. Another thing is art and books. You can use stickers and drawings. Put the stars above the tree. Point out your pictures in your book and say, "Look, the duck is in the pond. The frog is on the rock." Any picture book is great for this. But if you're not feeling particularly creative and you want the book to do it for you, books like Rosie's Walk or Where's Spot are great for this because they have those words in them. But that's not to say you can't just use any picture book and say those things yourself. It's calling attention to what is obvious, but giving words to what is there. Another example is to repeat and emphasize what you're saying. So when you're talking and your child asks for his bear, you say, "The bear is on the chair." And then your child looks at you or looks around and still doesn't find his bear. Or maybe he looks under the chair and you say, "Not under, on." And maybe you're even going to use your hand gestures to show one hand on top the other to represent on. And say it with a little playfulness and a smile. This helps your child to enter the zone of thinking so much easier. Now, some kids pick up on this just naturally, and it seems like magic, and that is common among kids when they're learning language, and we parents wonder, how did they do that? But it really is a science, and it really is something that can be taught, and it can be taught directly. So if your child is over 3 and they're still struggling with following simple directions, like in, on, under, behind, or if they're not using any prepositions in their speech, it is time to talk with somebody about your kiddo, and you can learn strategies that make a big difference. Now, that somebody could be me. It could be the speech language pathologist at your school. Sometimes people ask their pediatrician, and I do know that pediatricians know a lot about health and wellness, but they also look at the same Google charts fairly often that you look at for their answers on developmental milestones. So let's recap. Prepositions are the spatial representation type of words. The first words are often in, under, next to. It's all part of your child's language. That is your parts of speech. And in getting a big arsenal of vocabulary words that are these concept words, Your child is able to follow directions better. They're able to play with their peers and you better. They're able to express themselves more clearly. And the best way to teach them is going to be through play in your normal daily routines. When we talk with our child, the way you already do, and you narrate what goes on in their life according to what they are paying attention to. Don't hesitate to expand the vocabulary you use, to use words that are more complex. There is nothing magical about more complex words. Keep using them, such as instead of. It's a more complex idea, but you still use it, knowing that your child is not necessarily understanding it, that is, the young child, but we still use it. And then our children will start to use it, and they'll use it wrong, and then eventually they'll use it correctly, just like other words. So don't hesitate to use more complex prepositions as we fill their bucket of exposure to the words that they will ultimately need to learn. That is it. So if you have any questions about this, as always, feel free to email me at thelanguageofplay.com. And of course, sign up for the webinar. You will find the sign up link in the show notes. Thank you again to the Center for Play and Exploration for sponsoring this episode. Hey parents, I hope you found this episode helpful. If so, would you please take 30 seconds and share it with a friend who also lives or works with children? I would really appreciate it if you would leave a quick review for the show on Apple Podcasts. I read every review, and it lights me up to know that this show is making a difference. Then come join my Facebook community, where you'll meet other parents who are dedicated to helping their children grow too. You'll find the link in the show notes. Thank you for joining me. Now it's time to go. Let's pop our kiddos in the strollers and go look around outdoors and see what we have to talk about.